We did have quite a large sign up for this event today. Sometimes it takes people a few minutes to get started. I'm Karen DeLone with Life Sciences Pennsylvania. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and it's really my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. We're just delighted to have individuals from Biogen, Kimberly-Clark, and Novocure joining us today. It's my hope, as always, when we do this series, that there is some takeaway that you're able to glean from this casual conversation. Whether it could be something that you personally take away that you'd like to do yourself, something like that you'd like to bring back to your team, or perhaps even a company-wide initiative. But that is why we have the program, is to share insights, tips, things that our panelists have actually brought to their companies that could possibly work for you at your company. As we talk here today, and we do hope that this is just a very casual conversation. As we talk here today, if you have a question, please just stick it in the chat. And our wonderful moderator, Laura Yehuda from Ernst & Young, will take it and ask our panelists. A thank you again to Ernst & Young for sponsoring the series for the year. And I'll turn it over to Laura to guide this conversation. Thanks again, Laura.
Thanks so much, Karen, and thanks to the entire LSPA team for having me. I am thrilled. This is the best part of my day and week. I love this topic, and I love how engaged our audiences usually are, and our speakers have so much to share that I end up trying desperately to take notes as I listen to them. So very happy to be here today, and would love to introduce to all of you our panelists here today. If I could start with Peter.
Good morning, Peter Leahy. I work in marketing for Kimberly-Clark Professional. You may know us from health and wellness products like Kleenex and Scott. We also make manufactured rags. We also make PPE. And I've been with KC for 16 years. And really happy to be here and talk about DE&I and the way we promote our employees or create more of a sense of community.
Thanks, Peter. And Amy. Oh, Amy, I think you might be on mute.
Hear me now?
There you go.
Okay. I am with Novocure. We're a 20-year-old company that is in oncology. Our mission is to extend survival in some of the most aggressive forms of cancer. I've had 25 years of experience in HR, and at Novocure, we're really excited about some of the initiatives that we are launching. I would say we're more on a journey for DE&I, and so I'm here to share what we've learned and probably take a few learnings from others as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amy. And Christina.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So first, apologies. I'm using this external webcam, and of course, at the perfect moment, it stopped working. So I will get that fixed in a little bit. But hello, everyone. It's so good to be here this morning and join everyone. My role is predominantly around managing our employee resource networks, but also I come from more of an employee relations role as well. So a lot of what I do is honestly like handling HR investigations and hearing from our employees about what the concerns are, how I can be supportive, but also investigating more serious and escalated matters that may come to my team. But in addition, of course, working with the employee resource networks and seeing what we can do as an organization to respond to internal matters, but also external matters as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. I love that LSPA brings together speakers with really different organizational backgrounds, because you're coming from different places and, you know, different organizations, of course, but different roles in the organization makes a big difference for our audience too. So to the audience, I will just say, if you have any questions, please ask. I don't know if you can do a raise your hand emoji on Zoom, but certainly try to do anything, put a little smiley reaction or put a note in the chat for sure, and I will address that as we go. That's probably the best way, note in the chat. All right, great. So looking forward to this conversation. Let's get started. We have Seen a lot of news lately. We, at my organization, EY, we have something we call humans at the center. Humans always should have been at the center, but we talk a lot about putting employees first and thinking about employees' whole lives, not just as the people who work for your organization. So a lot of leaders today are thinking about overall well-being and employees as people first, and taking actions related to overall well-being. So with that, I'd love to ask, let's start, Christina, with you. If you could talk about some recent DEI efforts at your organization.
Sure, yeah, and I appreciate the question. So there's been a lot. There's a lot going on in the world that is impacting our people. It impacts me, impacts you, impacts everyone. And I think it's becoming increasingly challenging to separate the world in which we live in and the circumstances and these worldly events with our work, particularly when so many of us are also working from home. And so I'm thinking about two specific situations. So the most recent is the Supreme Court announcement on Friday that effectively overturns Roe versus Wade. When the Supreme Court leaked that draft, or rather when there was a leak of that draft about a month ago, it was honestly all I could think about. And I thought about what our response is going to be as an organization. Should we respond? How do we respond sensitively, but thinking about our people, what they need, what they might want? I'm located in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we have a major office here as well. We have over maybe 2,000 people located in North Carolina, but then we also have employees that live across the country. And so in thinking about our response to Roe versus Wade, what we worked on with our healthcare, healthcare insurer is creating a travel reimbursement that would assist employees who may need access to healthcare services that may not otherwise be available within a 100-mile radius of where they live. The great thing about this is that it's not limited to access to reproductive health. If you're struggling with substance abuse and you want to go to treatment, but the rehab of choice that you want to go to happens to be 3 states over, you could leverage our existing healthcare plan now to get that travel reimbursement for you as well. And I think that's so important when we think about wellness for our people. One, I think it's a timely response. I think it's what our people appreciate, what they are going to value. But 2, I think it's in response to the employee sentiment that we've been hearing, that we need to do more. If we have the resources to do more, we should. And I'm in full agreement with that. And then the second piece I'm thinking about is really giving people the opportunity to speak internally about what's top of mind for them. So following Friday, we actually tomorrow have a meeting with employees, all employees in the US, and there's no agenda on the meeting. It's really to hear what they're thinking about with regards to the overturn of Roe v. Wade and how we can support what they want to see from us. I just had a meeting yesterday with an employee. It was quite an emotional meeting where she gave me very candid feedback about her experience navigating our leave of absences a few years ago. And she gave me candid feedback about what she wants to see changed. And I think it's conversations like that where we provide a forum for people to speak what's top of mind, where we can take that feedback and figure out what can we reasonably action on. After the mass shooting in Uvalde a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we did the same thing. We brought together employees across the US. Obviously, not everyone attends, but whoever wants to and is comfortable attends. And they shared stories about what their fears were for their children. We invited a psychologist to join for that meeting to provide information to employees on how to have conversations about really sensitive matters like this with their children. So that I can even personally understand, what do employees expect from us? What do they expect from me? And how can I incorporate that feedback into the work? Which I think is, one, not only my job, but it's a very important part of my job, is taking the time to listen to what employees are actively looking for.
Thanks, Christina. That's fantastic. There's so much in there to dig into. I wonder, Peter, I know you've had at Kimberly-Clark some forums too for folks to interact. Can you tell us about those?
I can, but I think I need to go back with Christina. I mean, it's just one, it's a hard act to follow. So, try to be a little nicer next time. No, but all kidding aside, I think the activity and the bias for action that Biogen is demonstrating, that you provide that option, and that unfortunately there are these momentous occasions that it's not like it's a one and done, it's another topic to revisit or another opportunity to, it really shows a great caring. And I just want to, say hats off to you and the Biogen team, because that's active leadership in my opinion. Now, Laura, to your point, Kimberly-Clark Professional has a couple thousand employees across our offices, and for many years, all of the majority of our DE&I initiatives were based in the corporate office, and they were come down from the organization. It was any combination of whether it was a Pride network for LGBTQ employees, African American Employees Network, Latin American, young parents, women's forum, people in the military, military veterans, excuse me. And what we found was there was a gap. And so we sort of flipped the script and had an employee-led council on what is bubbling up from the organization perspective, and that we would write our charter and we would decide what topics that we would like to present to the organization. We would like to create a forum, just like Christina had said earlier. And I think the idea that it wasn't from HR or it wasn't a corporate initiative provided the right kind of balance that the organization was looking for, that the leadership on that team changes every 18 months. It has a free form agenda or charter, but again, as Christina mentioned, because new topics come up or because our population, our employees changes, what can we do to evolve with that?
That's great. I know that Amy, you two talk about diversity and equity and inclusion as a journey. And I know you also take in a lot of different voices in your strategy. Can you talk a bit about how that strategy has come together and what your journey looks like?
Yes, thank you. So it is interesting. One thing that I just have learned over the past several months is starting the conversation is so much more important than waiting for the strategy or waiting for the information that may come from the top. And I think we're hearing that from different organizations. And that's what we've been looking to do, is just start that conversation. It doesn't have to be started by HR, although oftentimes it is. And at Novacure, that's what we're starting to do. We have an employee-led internal steering committee that wasn't started by HR, but gained the approval. And the sole mission really is having those conversations. We've also done other things, a survey just to try and capture information and data, so that we can look to not only have the conversation, but then support it with the right data and the right metrics, just for funding purposes going into next year. If I can, what I've also found in this world that we're in is diversity. 2 or 3 years ago would have been focused on usually in the talent acquisition function, right? We need to bring a more diverse candidate slate to every position. And what I feel as though is changing is diversity, unique experiences. It's in organizations. It may just not be coming to light as effectively as it needs to be. And so having these conversations, I think, is really helping with the inclusion aspect of DE&I.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think there has been this shift. At first, it felt subtle, And all of a sudden, over the past couple of years, it has seemed a bit different and a bit quicker. I know, everyone likes to hear about overcoming challenges too, because it's not always a smooth ride. I wonder what kinds of challenges you've experienced as you've seen or implemented some diversity efforts, and how you and your organization have overcome them. Peter?
I think one of the first things that the whole rationale or the whole background about why we made some changes to our DE&I strategy, DE&I strategy, was we took a step back and we realized the face of our organization is primarily sales. And what we found was the disconnect between the population that we represent. We represent, I told you we make Kleenex. Guess what? Everybody buys it. So our population of people that buy our products, see our brands, we want to market to, and the sales organization that we had, primarily white men, didn't jive per se. So we thought that the face of our organization needed to better reflect the population, again, that we want to talk to, or the people that we want to market to. So that required some really soul searching on, well, are we hiring people, or are we just not attractive? We, as a company, do we not feel like a diverse population wants to work with us, or are we doing enough to promote people besides white men? Again, no offense to my male counterparts who are on the call, but making sure that we had a better representative culture for that diversity of thought and leadership, and how that would make a more of a statement to our stakeholders.
Yeah, that's great. Peter, I'm going to ask you another question too, because I was thinking about this as Amy was talking earlier about employee-led steerco. I also think that employees doing grassroots work is a bit different in the last couple of years too. Can you talk about some things that you've seen work well?
What we started was, thanks, Laura. What we started was, we call it truth talks for our organization. And it was, how do you have hard conversations? And, ageism and ableism were two of the first ones. And, what does that really mean? If it was more like a mirror that we could say, this is what ageism looks like. Do you have an unconscious bias that is potentially impacting your work or the people that you work with? And understand how to have that self-reflection in a way to be a better communicator and or a better listener to your coworkers.
Of the people in the audience I can see, and it's not many, I do see a lot of head shaking. So I know that a lot of people are agreeing with, oh, good. I didn't even have to prompt this question, Keith. Thank you very much. Let's see, I'm going to read that for our speakers who might not be able to see it. Peter, this comes from Keith Willis. Peter, how has your company improved its pipeline of diverse candidates? Companies seem to struggle in this area.
So, Keith, I'm going to say improving, yes. Even close to being adequate, no. Literally going to the African American MBA conference and other forums that would allow us to reach a more diverse audience. But I will also tell you, my friend Terry is a district manager for us in Texas, and he had a job for him at a convention center in Houston, and nobody came. Nobody in the entire city of Houston thought it'd be interesting, fun, or you could even make money with Kimberly-Clark. It was a better option to not choose Casey at all. And that was a real slap in the face, that we do not present ourselves as a company that either appreciates, attracts, or promotes a diverse audience. So we have a long, long, long way to go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Christina, I see you shaking. Anything you want to say about that too?
Yeah, I think it's a great point that in the past and possibly in the present, our focus tends to be on talent attraction and talent acquisition. But what I see as someone who sits in the ER space and meets with employees and investigates issues as they come is another thing we struggle with is, okay, once we've gotten them to the organization? How do we retain them? And how do we make them feel like this is an inclusive place to work? Because you can attract folks of color into your organization with a very competitive offer. You can attract anyone to your organization with a very competitive offer. But what makes people stay is that they feel valued, that they feel heard. And it's something I think that requires ongoing conversation, like very uncomfortable at times conversation with people, leaders, with colleagues. Someone may make a comment at work that is very subtle, but it makes people uncomfortable, and it requires being able to give that person real-time feedback so that we can slowly but surely start, ensuring that this is going to be a very inclusive place to work for everyone. So I do think it's a great point about talent attraction versus what can we do to retain.
Thank you, Christina. Amy, you've done something that sounded really interesting to me that I had never heard of before. Maybe I don't get around much, but it was really fascinating with what you've done with talent acquisition and certifying your folks as diversity recruiters. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, we did offer I will say that talent acquisition generally is where you want to find the diverse talent and bring them into the organization. So whether it's through certainly internship programs, I know strive to do that, as do, something everyone can take advantage of. Most companies will have an employee referral. And so really look into that and help your talent acquisition team identify and find talent from unique experiences. What we did though was we also went out, and there is a certification that you can get to help with what are other ways that we can find talent and bring it into the organization. So everybody goes through LinkedIn, and there's certainly, people are very familiar with ways in which talent is certain ways in which we find and source talent. But we partnered with, and I'm looking at the exact name now, with it's a recruiting diversity. So it's a certification for diverse recruiters. And it provided different ways to source talent that we hadn't thought of. So you get into certain habits, you get into certain agencies, you get into certain websites. And this really helped with how to search differently to attract employees or to attract candidates with unique and diverse backgrounds.
Thank you, Amy. We have another question that came in from Kate. There's been a shift from DEI to DEIB. How important is adding belonging to the equation, and how do you support this element? I'll answer it first, actually. At EY, we do a couple things with our clients. We had something called high performing teams, HPT, and it was always about ensuring productivity and helping leadership make sure their employees were extremely productive. And it was a very great program. Everyone loved it. And we shifted it to high belonging teams, HBT, which is a very different program that helps organizations look at belonging and make people feel like they're part of a team. It's been so much harder these last 2 years since we've been hybrid and working remotely. So high belonging teams has a lot of the elements I've heard our speakers already talk about, from gathering employee sentiment to building small groups and driving grassroots effort with some coaching and support and behavioral nudges. So even just that, and as a consultant and selling services to our clients, we've seen that shift happen. So we've changed what some of our offerings are for our people advisory services. But I do turn that over to the speakers about the B element of DEIB. Christina?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was hired into my role during the pandemic, and that was one of my biggest pieces of feedback I provided to my manager and my leaders, was that having not ever met my colleagues for I mean, there are so many colleagues I work with every day I still have not met, because most of them are actually located in Massachusetts, is I felt for the first year like an independent contractor. I used to say, like, I don't feel like a full-time employee here. Like, I'm doing work, I have a full-time schedule, but I don't feel like I'm a part of the organization. And I think in part because working remotely was still pretty new to me, it was so difficult. There's so much of the culture, I think, within an organization that I missed out on, having started remotely and having not had the opportunity to work in an office environment. Now, 2.5 years into this, I'm used to it, and everything's okay now. But in the beginning, certainly it was very challenging. I don't think I have an answer. I think my answer is yes, it's important. People absolutely need to feel included. They need to feel empowered to recognize that they own this work as much as anyone else. How do we go about doing that? I think is still an open conversation for me. It's something top of mind every single day in my work. And I can speak, I think, for my team as well. We always solicit, I know I've been saying this ongoing throughout anytime I speak, is that we solicit feedback from people, and we will continue to do that because we want everyone, regardless of their seniority level, race, gender, what have you, to feel like they can be as candid as they want at work, to feel that they own this just as much as I do. And I think it happens through small acts every single day. But yeah.
Anybody else want to talk about the B element of belonging, Peter?
Laura, I'd love to build on that. I think there's two different things. So number one is we have annual engagement scores on how we measure our company, our teams, and we look at that year over year, knowing that the pandemic has really changed the calculus on some things. And it gets down to the idea that I feel like I belong in my organization. I feel like my managers support me. I feel like the company's going in direction. I feel confident about the team leadership. I think obviously we contract with an organization like that. I'm sure you could either find those questions online or find a similar company. But I want to talk to something about belonging. So I'm a classic extrovert. I miss being in the office. I miss being around people. And I have been going to the office once, twice a week, and it's horrible. Nobody is there. It's like it's a ghost town every time you go, and every time it's a disappointment. So the sense of belonging that I used to get from the office isn't fulfilling me now when I go into the empty office. So I want to tell everyone that we haven't figured it out. But and you know, my new director lives in Chicago, and she says she's always had remote teams. So how you create that sense of community that's not anchored in an actual physical location, we're going to have to figure this out as we're going, and we know that that will be the way of the future, that it'll be less physical and more virtual.
I think that's so interesting, Peter. I know a lot of folks here are from different size organizations, and I work for a company that's 300,000 people globally with 90,000 in the US. And I'll just share this because I love that you said that, Peter. I joined also during the pandemic, and I thought it was a little weird, frankly, that we had these things called circles. And the circles have from 50 to 80 people in them with a circle leader, and we meet remotely about once a month, and we learn about different activities the organization is undertaking. It's where we talk about performance and all the stuff we have to talk about, but it's also where we get together with people who do the same kind of work we do. The circles are created with people in the same service lines. So my circle is on the East Coast. It goes down from Washington, D.C., all the way up to New York. So there's several of us across several offices at EY. And while I thought it was a little weird when I joined, and they've always done this, even before the pandemic, I think it's great now because my circle never worked in the same office, and they're always there. And so we've gotten to know folks across several offices and lots of miles, and we meet each other and we drive to see each other, which is different. So it becomes more of a whole person thing rather than just knowing each other at work. Back to that first question I posed with people being people inside and outside of work. And look, Peter is giving us a real DEIB example pet emergency. So sorry, Peter, to hear about your pet emergency, but hope everything's okay. And I'm glad that you were able to bring your authentic self to our discussion today. I do want to ask you, we talked about this too just before the call. We've talked a lot about the what that organizations are doing and the activities you're undertaking, but I do want to ask for a second about the why. I feel like in these conversations, we sometimes think the why is implicit. Oh, DEI, well, because obviously we're going to do it. It's the right thing to do. But are there other whys? So Amy, can you talk about how efforts started at NovoCure and what the why was there for you?
Absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity, Laura. And Peter, I hope your pet is okay. At the end of the day, companies exist to make money and make an impact. So, right, you do have to tie everything you're doing to the bottom line. Having a work environment that enables you to perform a little higher or enables you to bring more energy is a very valid work reason, business reason. We found, and certainly right now with so many people looking for new jobs, right, we want to make sure that we're retaining the talent that we need so that we can maintain consistency in many of our initiatives. And so that's a very strong driver. When you have so much diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, needs, and you're seeing people leaving organizations, the question starts becoming, why are they leaving? And so the simple things of exit strategies, exit surveys that most companies have in place, spending a little bit more time asking that question when people leave about did they feel as if they belonged in the organization. When people leave, they have a little bit more of a tendency to maybe speak the truth sometimes. So you may be able to hear issues that you may not hear in a circle, which I think is a great idea, by the way, or, in some of these conversations that we're having. And so I would really encourage people to take a look at some of these tried and true programs. Another that we have launched is, just the simple internship program. It's easier to find people who are willing to commit 8 weeks in the summer. So filling those seats aren't as usually not very difficult. How many want to stay is the question, right? So you can start asking yourself, what is your conversion rate from college interns to full-time? The way work is today, so much of it can be virtual. Do those college students want to stay on 10, 15 hours a week? Do they come back the following summer? Do you ask them at the end of the summer how they felt? Did they feel as though they belonged? You can ask these college students who have spent 10 weeks in your organization, give them a mini exit survey. And I always recommend it to be face-to-face or at least Zoom to Zoom, because you'll get additional insight into how your organization is set up. So the why is it's always tied to business. It is important for us as a society to hear what our employees need and not keep going back to the same old, same old. And the reason why it's important is because we're evolving as a society. America is having conversations with government, with probably mostly with the government that have never been had before. One other piece is, right, we've been talking a lot about our employees and what they're looking for, but other government agencies are now looking at what we're doing from a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. The FDA wants to make sure that before anything is approved, is it reaching a more diverse, more unique background of people? And so, this conversation is happening at all levels, the board level, the federal level, the local level. Every employee is talking about it, either at work, at home, at the kitchen table. And so for us not to have that conversation is, I mean, it's unheard. It does not help the business, and it certainly does not help the employee base. And for people who may be on the call who aren't having the conversation, anyone can start these conversations. They don't have to be started by the top, by the CEO or by the head of HR. We've heard of numerous examples where people are just having smaller conversations. So a little longer than you may have wanted, Laura, but I appreciated the question. Thank you.
No, it's perfect, and it makes me think too about how do people get engaged who want to be friends or allies of a certain group, right? Like, I think about my son who's in Latinos y Amigos in his school because he loves to speak Spanish and wants to become involved with the organization, even though he's not Latino. So I think these things, it's exciting because I see them happening at younger ages, and I feel like sometimes our organizations can learn a lot from the schools. But I do wonder about allies and friends and how that happens. Is there, Christina, do you have any stories of success there for Biogen?
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking, so right now, actually, as we speak, my colleagues are hosting a training with an external organization for all employees in the US who want to attend. And I believe the title of the training is How to Be an Upstander. The idea is anyone who wants to show up as an ally at work, this is a training for you. We're going to give you practical tips on what that might look like. And I think I alluded to this before, but sometimes, you don't need to witness a blatant violation. You don't need to witness something blatantly racist or blatantly sexist to intervene. We have a few ways people can and have intervened. I mean, I can think of for myself personally, we had, I was in a conference call setting where a male colleague of mine interrupted a female colleague of mine and kind of suggested that her idea was not that great. I personally really liked her idea. And I felt like had I not said something in that moment, we would have just moved on, right? He would have taken time from her to speak whatever he wanted to speak, and we would have never heard her voice. And so it was kind of in that moment in real time, I said, I think she's on to something. Let's hear more about that. Really minor practical ways of showing support at work to your coworkers will go a very long way. I've checked in on coworkers during very tense meetings or in a meeting where I feel like something was said that I know made me uncomfortable. It probably made this individual uncomfortable. Let me go ahead and check in on them. Things like that. But then in addition to that, we have an anonymous helpline complaint or an anonymous complaint helpline. You can submit a report online anonymously. You can call a 1-800 number anonymously. The folks who answer the call they all work for a third party organization. We will never find out who initiated that anonymous helpline complaint. But what happens is they take the report, they send the report over to our compliance team, who then will send it possibly to my team for some investigation. And several of my investigations have come from people who saw something that possibly didn't directly affect them, but they saw that it affected others. And whoever it affected themselves wouldn't say anything about it. So they felt a sense of obligation to go ahead and raise their hand, even anonymously, to say there's something unusual, something unfortunate happened on this team. I witnessed it, please try to address it. And we will, and we do, and we have. And so I think situations like that, and I really like the anonymous component, is something we can all do. If we see something at work or hear something at work, or if a colleague tells us that something weird or unfortunate or unacceptable happens, to escalate those issues accordingly. Because the only way we can hold people accountable and educate is if we know what's happening and what people's experiences are at work.
Thank you for that story and for being such a brave upstander, Christina, in addition to encouraging it and driving it within your organization. I put the definition of upstander from Google in here because we know what it means, but I've recently only heard it as part of the DE&I world and part of our culture and organizations, and I love it, and that you're doing that training. Peter Gallagher just made a comment. Great point on being an upstander. We speak with our children about being one at school, which does a great job of promoting the importance, but good reminder that it applies in the work environment as well, right? The Google definition basically talks about it being at school. I could see that first definition changing to be more broad in the next couple of years because of what's happening. Eric Neely says, thanks, Christina, for mentioning upstanders. Casey has also brought awareness to this with education to its associates. So it's great to hear. Any other comments, any other questions? Seems like, oh, here, I'm going to read this to you because I know at least one person doesn't have access to the chat. Darren says, someone commented that you don't have to wait for corporate to begin these discussions. So based on what you're seeing now, do you think that the reversal of Roe will finally get people to stop pretending that, quote, politics should not be discussed in the office? Politics is the process in which decisions are made about healthcare, minimum wage, unions, taxes, etc. All of these issues and more impact the workplace. I don't know if anyone wants to respond. Christina, looks like you're on.
Yeah, this is something that has been top of mind for me for a while. I think we are entering a time period where it is near impossible to pretend like we cannot talk about politics at work. There was a time period years ago, maybe 10 years ago, where that logic flew and was widely accepted and we didn't talk about it. These days, particularly when we're working in our homes, a lot of us, right, are working in our homes, issues with childcare, school closures, vaccinations, mask wearing, overturning of Roe v. Wade, which directly will impact people in your workplace one way or another in ways we may not understand. All of that, these mass shootings, we had, after Uvalde, so many of my colleagues did not let their children show up to school that following Monday. They said, my kid is home, I want them home. It is what it is. So it's hard to pretend like we can't talk about this. I think that we have to talk about it. I think we need to be sensitive with how we have these conversations. Agreed that, after the draft leaked from Roe v. Wade last month, I showed up at work that Monday and could not concentrate. It impacted my ability to do my job. There was nothing else I cared more about than the anxiety of what happens if Roe v. Wade is overturned. I raised it to my leader and I said, we plan to respond, right? And the response was like, I don't know. And it was a good reminder for me at that moment. And I think you said it, Amy, I quoted you actually. You said starting the conversation is way more important than waiting for the strategy. It was in that moment that I realized this is my opportunity to start this conversation. Because if we all pretend like nothing's happening, everything's okay, let's not talk about it, I don't know if we would have issued some kind of response. But it was because we started the conversation very grassroots. There wasn't anything planned on the agenda. We didn't have a plan just yet, but I realized it was really incumbent on us to start the plan and to loop in the right stakeholders between corporate affairs, our team, and all the other relevant teams to make sure that whatever plan we're putting forth, we all are aligned. The plan that I put forth and that we put forth as a team is not the plan that we ended up with, but it was through this nonstop conversation over the last month that we were able to get to a place where on Friday, when Roe v. Wade was at once overturned, we were ready to execute on our plan because we had done all this work over the last month. So I do agree. It's you can't wait for someone else to speak up for you or for your team. We don't know what people are thinking. And I think it's taken me some time to realize it's okay to be uncomfortable at work and to say things out loud that are obviously impacting me personally. Because if it's impacting me personally, I highly doubt I'm the only one. So for me, I'm on an ongoing journey in that space of being willing and forcing myself to say the uncomfortable things at work, because I'm now realizing that that's why I was hired. You know, that's why we were hired, to speak up and to use our voice at work.
I hear your passion coming through, and I got chills while you were talking. And I have to say, I said the same thing in the last session we had in the DEI discussion a few months ago with different speakers, which is there has never been a time in history that has felt like this. I've been working for 28 years, and I don't feel like we could bring our passions to our workplace and politics and the things that really drive change the way we can do it today and make change happen for the benefit of all the people who work in our organizations. It's an exciting, incredible time in our history. So thank you for sharing that. I would ask Peter, any other responses? I don't think he's back. Amy, other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just would echo so much of what Christina's saying. You know, so often, I guess in the past, it would be around any topic. I would do some either educational sessions or just meet and greets and talking to employees. And, you know, so often it would be, well, my manager hasn't done anything. Whether it's, you know, I've asked, you know, do you have a mentor at work? Well, my manager hasn't given me one. You know, did you finish the engagement survey? Oh, well, you know, it doesn't matter anyway. It won't go anywhere. You know, this attitude sometimes of individuals, it's when people will say, yes, I did ask, or yes, I did complete it. It's incumbent upon every single employee in an organization, you know, if you want change to happen, you have to be a part of that change. And so waiting and wondering and complaining and using your energy for that negativity, it's just not going to help move the ball forward. So I love, right, this idea of speaking up. And it doesn't have to be loud, and it doesn't have to be the leader, but having a message of, as an employee in this organization, we want you to participate in all that is here. So that means looking at your engagement scores and making sure that they're high. And if they're not, you have to start asking questions why. Yeah, I just love, Christina, that, you know, speaking up in meetings, taking that moment to send a text or an email after to say, hey, that seemed odd. Are you okay? All of those things make leveraging the employee referral program, right? Like there's so many things that are standard in many organizations. And we might just want to look at them a little bit differently, promote them a little bit more loudly, because there are opportunities for people to find their voice, I think, in most organizations. It's just sometimes you might have to look for it, or you may have to ask a different questions. So that's just what I would offer, that I think it is an amazing time, and there's so much that can be done, and you can step up and lead. But at the very basic, you can just be an engaged employee.
Thank you, Amy. That's great. I wonder too, with just about 2 or 3 minutes before we break into breakout groups, are there any last questions folks have? I know we're all coming from, some are in small organizations, some are in one-person organizations. Any tips that our speakers can share with you before we go into breakouts that we have not covered yet today? Oh, I think I missed a comment from Ed. Sorry, Ed. All right, let's see. Another thing I've seen people conflate is personal and human rights issues with politics. As a gay man, it's important for me to be authentic in who I am. And yes, I do get involved politically, but not everything has to be deemed a political hot button issue. I'm a human who deserves to be seen and valued. That's not politics. Case in point, Disney standing up for its people is suddenly seen as, quote, political, rather than being a good employer who is looking out for its people. Oh, and Peter's back with that. I don't know. This may be unfair to put you on the spot, Peter. I don't know if you heard that comment.
I heard just a little bit of it. Could you, okay, so sorry. So my dog has some growths and the vet had a cancellation. And so I just had to go run and drop her off at the vet so she could have some tumors removed. So back.
No, oh gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So-
no, it's all good. We've just been talking politics. You've missed a fascinating part of the conversation. You'll have to
Well,
watch the recording.
Yes, and I can't, I heard the end of it about that what Disney did was considered political and not actually standing up for its employees.
Right.
I think what's interesting about the Disney, and I love to talk politics, and if we can, how much people want to, I think what's interesting, Disney, obviously it looks like the calculus was they were too much behind they were behind the curve. So it was more of a reaction to not really being more upfront with the Don't Say Gay bill, and more importantly, to represent how do I say this correctly? To fight for their employees or feel like their LGBT population and allies were actually valued, as opposed to having to backtrack. And of course, then what the governor of Florida tried to do I think that type, I would imagine I can envision the same thing happening in Texas and Florida now, with companies that will provide support if their employees want to have women's health care in another state. I mean, you know this is coming. The governors feel the right. They'll call a corporation that does that woke. They'll try to punish it. And the question is, and to me, this is where, when I think about how marriage equality might be affected by the Supreme Court, will marriage equality be undid because so many organizations have signed up for amicus briefs when it came out in 2015, and corporations have PACs and they have money and they give money to politicians. And if you undo marriage equality and you as a politician cut off your support for the money that you might receive, could that be a deterrent to potentially keep that in the books? Now, again, you can't say. So I know I didn't answer the person's question correctly. I didn't hear it exactly, but would love if you need a more perspective on that.
Well, I love that we're ending with something as exciting as that comment, Peter. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but because we will be now this amazing discussion. Thank you all, actually. Amy, Christina, Peter, fantastic. We will go into some networking breakouts that will be automatically sent into. So I love when we end on something really cool and exciting. So not cool, a shame, but exciting to talk about. Thank